Well, here we are in session number 99. We're looking yet at Mark chapter 16, Matthew chapter 28, Luke chapter 24, and John chapter 20. Looking today at Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene. A couple questions again to start. What happened after Peter and John left the tomb? Remember, Mary had bolted from the tomb before seeing an angel, had reported the empty tomb to Peter and John. They took off on foot, racing to the tomb, back to the tomb. They saw that the thing was empty, that things were in order, and that something had happened that they were not yet aware of. But what happened after they left? They went back to their homes, it said. What that means, I'm not quite sure, since they were in Jerusalem and not in Galilee. Where was Mary Magdalene at this time? Had she stayed back where she reported to them? Had she tried to follow them? What was going on? And where were the other women who by now have reported to the other men, at least to the other men, what they had found in terms of the angels and the empty tomb? But was Mary Magdalene still in the dark about the resurrection? Well, let's go and see. Before we go on, though, just a point. In this chapter 16 of Mark, most scholars believe that Mark's gospel, as he wrote it, ended at 16:8, and that perhaps the real ending that Mark had written was lost. And some believe that early church writers tried to fill in the verses after verse 8. For that reason, I'm not going to spend any time specifically on those verses, but we'll go to the other three Gospels to get what we need. So we're going to skip that ending in Mark and go to the other three. But apparently, according to John, Mary Magdalene had followed Peter and John back to the tomb. Evidently, she was behind them. It just seems reasonable. Apparently, again, when she followed them back to the tomb, she must have waited outside for a while they were looking at the tomb and inspecting it and making the decisions that they were to make. Apparently, according to John, she had followed Peter and John. Whether she arrived before Peter and John left, we don't know. We're only told that she was there. She was about to receive her greatest surprise. And of course, you know what that is. She's about to become the first person to see the risen Christ. It'll surely answer her question about the resurrection. Let me read verse 11 of John 20. But Mary stood outside the tomb, weeping. As she wept, she bent down and looked into the tomb, which, of course, was empty last time she was there. She evidently did not realize that Jesus had risen, but that the angels had apparently returned or became visible again, visible to Mary Magdalene, while Peter and John made no such sighting. There's no indication Peter and John saw any angels. Verse 12, and she, Mary Magdalene, saw two angels sitting in white, sitting where Jesus' body had been lying, one at the head, one at the feet. John, like Luke, states that two angels were present. Actually, we're not told whether these two angels are in fact the same that appeared earlier to the women. We suspect they probably were, but we're not told that. And they spoke to Mary directly. In verse 13, verse half of verse 13, they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Mary Magdalene should have been rejoiced when she heard their early conversation at the tomb. But if she left before that conversation, she wouldn't have had any notion of what they said. Well, they just, we don't know a lot of what's going on, but they ask her a very straightforward question. The question that doesn't seem the angel should have had to ask, but they said, "Why are you crying?" Mary answered them with telltale signs that she had not heard their earlier conversation, or did not understand it if she had heard it. I think she didn't hear it. She left before they became visible. Remember, the women were in the tomb for a while before the angels showed themselves to them. So I think Mary Magdalene hightailed it out before the angels came and showed themselves to be present. Last half of verse 13 and verse 14, John writes, Mary replied, "They have taken my Lord away." She still believes that somebody's moved the body. "I do not know where they have put him." When she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. We're going to see that on the Emmaus Road also, that Jesus was not recognized at first. Why didn't she recognize Jesus? We're not told. It was daylight. People have come up with several speculations. Her eyes were clouded from tears. That seems to make some sense. It was not still fully light, probably not the case. I think it was fully light by now because of the number of half-mile trips that would have been made. It was still not, Jesus' appearance was altered. I doubt that too, but it's certainly a possible, it's a doable. God intervened to prevent her from recognizing Jesus. I think that's very likely what happened. That Jesus, as God himself, is capable of keeping his person from being recognizable until he's ready for them to recognize him. So, Jesus responds to Mary's stare. I'm sure she's staring at him, waiting for an answer. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for?" She didn't recognize him even when he spoke to her. You would have thought his voice would have been another clue. But we're going to see that in a minute play out. Verse 15, because she thought he was the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will take him." She clearly believed that someone had taken the body and moved it, Jesus' body. She's still at that point. How would she expect to move Jesus' body without help? She's evidently there alone, unless she thought the two angels would help her. Who knows? Or Jesus himself as the gardener. To where would she take the body if she had it? Wouldn't she have known that touching the body would have defiled her and kept her from the rest of the Passover festivities? I don't think those were big issues with her, but she should have been aware of it. Could this indicate that Mary was a woman of some means? Reburial of Jesus would have incurred cost she was apparently willing to cover. I don't know what her wealth status was. You know that her status in the community probably was not all that high, but wealth-wise, we don't really know. If you had written the script for Jesus' appearances, to whom would you have him first appear? Most of us likely would have chosen Peter and John for the first visit, but then Jesus' priorities are often different from ours. What he's trying to do and accomplish, he will do and accomplish. Clearly, one suspects Mary had not given any consideration to the problem of dealing with Jesus' reburial. She just wanted to properly deal with her Savior's body. But people respond to the sound of their own name. Listen to this in verse 16. Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. So she recognized him the minute that he used her name. I can remember being in a large room with an important meeting and maybe 15 people in the room, and Stan was in one corner of the room talking with people. I was in the opposite corner of the room talking to people. Stan spoke my name in conversation, not trying to get my attention, and I heard him across a room of 50 people. So you do hear and respond to your name more than just simply words. I never heard anything else Stan said that day. So Mary's initial response was to worship Jesus and not let him go. But Jesus had other matters in mind. Jesus replied, "Do not touch me." That means that word for touch really means do not take a hold of me and keep holding on to me, because I have not yet ascended to my Father. So Jesus is planning on going to his Father in heaven sometime during this Sunday. "Go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." So now he's placing the fatherhood of God to the believer. I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, my God, your God. He's changing his relationship with his people. He was telling Mary that clinging physically to him, which is from the Greek word for touch, wouldn't have to wait. This is the first time in the Gospels that disciples are called brothers, by the way, by Jesus. Evidently, sometime later that same day, Jesus had several appearances that will be discussed in future episodes. But apparently, at some point, he ascended to heaven to meet with the Father, likely before any other appearances. He appeared to the other women in a bit later who had been at the tomb. We'll talk about that either in the next session or the following one, but I think likely the next session. Jesus spoke sometime that afternoon with Peter. Later he spoke with 2 disciples on the Emmaus Road in Luke 24. Then Jesus spoke with two disciples there, as we mentioned, and then he met with 10 of the 11 close-in people, the 11 original disciples, that evening, also in Luke 24 and John 20. We actually do not know the exact timing between all of these events or the actual sequencing. All we have is clues that they all happened. But Mary did as she was expected to do, and we'll see that next time. Speaking of the other women, where were they now? They hadn't seen Jesus for themselves yet, but Mark declares that Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene and later to the larger group of women. So he still hasn't appeared to the other women. I think he, after talking with Mary, took off to meet with the Father, then returns and meets with the women. My speculation. They may still have been at that time at the house with the other disciples in the process of reporting, but they also may have left that after they reported and head back toward the tomb. We don't know for sure. They may have noticed Mary Magdalene's disappearance and started on their way back to the tomb, see if they could find her. We don't know these things. The women will all have an eventful day. They've already had an eventful day. They went to the empty tomb. They went inside and saw it was empty. The angels appeared, and then they heard what the angels said, that they were soon to see Jesus alive, but they hadn't yet. So they want to be the first to proclaim the good news after the resurrection. So that's where we're going to leave it. Mary Magdalene has seen Jesus. Jesus says he has to ascend to meet with the Father. He has not met with the other women yet. Next time, we'll look at those things.